Part 3 of the chapter 13 is the price to earning ratio. So previous two part, first part we see the book value of the equity. In the second part we see how to use the dividend discount models to evaluate the stock. Now there are some weaknesses in dividend discount models. We can actually show many things, but one of the most serious thing is, well, the dividend discount model only can be used when company pay dividends. So everything else, I mean, there are like many assumptions we have to make, and some assumptions we cannot accept, maybe, or it's very unrealistic, maybe. But I mean, in some way we can explain, like we can justify that. But if the firm does not pay dividend, it's very hard to justify the dividend discount models. So another way to evaluate stock is we use the PE multiples or any multiples using price to show the value of the stock. So first of all, we try to see the relation between the PE ratio and the growth opportunity. First of all, the PE ratio is simply the price to earnings. So PE ratio equals to price per share. This PPS is price per share divided by earnings per share. Earnings per share, not R. That's EPS. So price per share is simply the market price of the stock per one share, and the earnings per share is equals to the net income divided by number of shares outstanding. Okay, so that's the EPS. So really the multiples compare the current price of the stock relative to the current earnings, the accounting earnings actually. So what determines the PE ratio? Now, if you remember the previous slide regarding the PVGO, yeah, too much. Let's find the PVGO. Oh yeah, we have this. So price equals to no gross per share plus the PVGO, right? So it means that the price equals to E1 divided by K plus PVGO. And we can rewrite this, just simply divide by everything divided by E1. What you can find is now PE ratio here equals to, so the first term is simply 1 over K, right? And the second term is PVGO divided by E1. So if you factor out K 1 over K, then it's 1 plus PVGO divided by E1 divided by K. So this E1 divided by K is no gross opportunity price, right? Okay, so that's it. So the determinant is, first of all, now the required rate of returns, obviously. Second, price, present value of growth opportunity, so growth opportunity itself, and third factor is the no growth opportunity stock price. So if you look at 13.5 example, return again to takeover target. The firm we first encountered in example 13.4, if you remember the last slide, earnings are $5 per share, so EPS equals to 5. Okay, and the capitalization rate is the 15%. Now, implying that the no gross value of the firm, which is the E1 divided by K, equals to 5 divided by 15%, which is $33.33, right? And now price actually equals to 20 to 22, as you remember, since the PBGO equals to negative 11.11, right? So if you plug into this formula, like the P ratio equals to 1 over 15 divided by, multiplied by the 1 plus PVGO is the negative 11.11 divided by $33.33, and it's going to be 4.44 times. Okay. So that's the PE ratio of this stock. PE ratio of this stock. So what's the meaning of this PE ratio? So PE ratio is basically also can be rewrite like this. So first of all, this ROE minus times B equals to growth rate. So it's actually same as 1 minus B divided by K minus G. I mean, you can verify it from the previous slide actually using this formula, and then you can get this result. It means that you can actually have the PE ratio related to obviously this clawback ratio, and then the ROE and the required rate of returns. Okay. So there's a PEG ratio. Now the PE ratio is the PE ratio divided by growth rate. Okay, growth rate. So if you this one divided by growth rate, it's actually very close to 1. Very close to 1 for many companies. I cannot say that it's for everyone, but it's very close to 1. PEG ratio. So PE ratio divided by growth rate is close to 1. So, I mean, this is just the plug the number into formula. We can see the growth rate. So now let's look at this example. It's a little long. So assume the risk-free rate is 8%. Market risk premium is also 8%. This is kinds of the average market risk premium in the United States. And the 40% clawback ratio, that's also the average in the United States. So 40% clawback to the retained earnings then, and 60% paid out. So your expected return on the market should be the risk-free rate, so 8% plus another 8% premium, so 16%. So let's say this is K, this is market capitalization rate for beta equals to 1 company, because beta equals 1 means that the risk is market level, right? If we also accept as reasonable ROE equal to 16%, because K is a 16, we also accept the project if the ROE is above 16%. So at least we can say that the reasonable ROE should be 16%. If it is below 16%, then you lose value, right? So your general ROE is probably above 16%. That's all the assumptions from the historical data. And the growth rate may be estimated by the ROE times B, is again clawback, so 16% times 40% clawback ratio, so about 6.4%. From these, the PE ratio equals to, as you know, 1 minus B divided by K minus G. So if you plug number into this formula, then it's going to be 6.26 times. 6.26 times. So this is kind of historical average of the PE ratio for overall company is beta equals to 1. And it's basically just the historical average, so it doesn't have to be true for all companies. We just to the average. And if you look at this 6.26 P ratio and the growth rate 6.4, the PEG ratio is around 1, right? Because it's pretty close. 6.4 versus 6.26. So it's kind of consistent with our assumption that the PEG ratio is close to 1. However, now the next part, like almost all others, will not work in all circumstances, obviously, right? So if the long-term treasury bond is about 3%, so now let's say risk-free rate is not 8, is 3%. It's more close, it's even lower for many years, And the RM equals to 11% because it's 3% plus 8% now, right? Then for beta equals to 1, ROE is about this. So ROE should be 11. So the growth rate is 11% point, 40%, so 4.4%. Now PE ratio is 9.1%, which means that it's not really 1, it's 2.1 PEG ratio. So what does it mean? It means that, well, the price may be too low. You have growth opportunity a lot higher, 4.4%. I mean, the growth opportunity is 4.4%, right? The PE ratio is 9.1%. So 9.1 divided by 4.4 is 2.1. Is maybe potential underpricing because the price looks quite low, actually. So it signals potential underpricing. So you can actually calculate the PEG ratio, and PEG ratio is greater than 1, then you can say, oh, it's kinds of signal that the PE, the price is underpriced. Doesn't have to be always true, though. So it's a very rough way to show the mispricing. So it doesn't have to be always true, but it may be because it's kind of one of the signals. So in this case, all else equal, riskier stock have lower PE ratio, right? Because K is higher, obviously, right? Right. So if it gets riskier, then your PE ratio gets lower. The PE ratio, this is the relation between the PE ratio and inflation, and it's actually moved quite opposite way, right? So like 2009, the PE ratio is, really rise, the inflation low. So sometimes if the PE ratio is just rising up, then it means that, that has two meanings actually. So if the PE ratio is quite high, it means the price is too high, right? Price may be too high relative to the earnings. Deflationary economy, earnings decline, so PE ratio automatically increases actually. So that's maybe show the relation between inflation and the PE ratio. And it's inverse related. In many cases, the PE ratio is also the signal of the mispricing comparing with other industry, other companies in same industry. So if the PE ratio is too high in comparing with industrial average, it means the real price may be too high. So it may be the signal of overpricing. If the PE ratio is too low, comparing with your industry average, then the PE rate it is a kind of signal that your price is too low, so that the price is underpriced. Now, what is the weaknesses of the PE ratio analysis? First of all, there's called earnings management. Now, earnings management is not illegal. It's kinds of accounting techniques, skills. So using the flexibility of accounting. So US GAAP or international GAAP allow many options for a company to choose. You don't have to just follow one rules. There are some choices. Using these choices, the company may raise or lower the earnings, which is called earnings management. Again, it is not illegal, but it may distort the to show the company's real situation. So there's a called discretion. Discretion means the difference between the earnings management numbers and real numbers. If discretion is large, then they measure earnings basically. And earnings management also, this is kind of another problem. You know, you see the earnings growth for two companies, Conad and FedEx, then FedEx earnings growth is actually very volatile. Conad is kind of the relatively stable. And if you look at this, the PE ratio is quite different actually, Conad. And the Conad, because Conad's earnings is relatively stable, the PE ratio is stable, but Intel's very fluctuated, like probably FedEx is also fluctuated. So it means that the PE ratio may be different by industry too. So you have to compare with your industry average, comparing with the residential construction major airlines, whose PE ratios are quite low, to the security software, application software, whose PE ratio is quite high. So if you are in the residential construction business, you compare PE ratio. You should not compare with the application software company because of different industry characteristic. You may explain, like you may lead to the wrong decision, wrong conclusions. So always compare with same industry. We can also combine this PE analysis and the dividend discount model by estimating stock price at horizon date. We are not going to do that for this chapter. Other comparables now, because earning may be negative, there may be big trouble. Especially for most of starting a firm, they have negative income, right? If they have negative income, then PE ratio is also negative, which is not useful. So instead of that, you can use the price to sales ratio, which is very useful because the starting a company, even they have sales number. The problem is sales number does not really reflect the performance of the firm, and the stock price should be related to the performance itself, not sales. But there may be good proxies. Price to book ratio is indicate how aggressively market value the firm. The book value is basically the value when they issue the stock. If the price is quite high, then they perform pretty well. The market aggressively value the firm relative to the cost of the company's equity money. Price to cash flow ratio, it may resolve the issue of the earnings management because the cash flow itself may be less affected by the accounting decision, so they avoid the kinds of earnings management problems. Still, cash flow itself does not really also show the performance itself. So, well, the idea here is we need to compare with the performance. Then you probably, the best one is price to earnings ratio. Probably the next one is price to sales ratio. But I mean, the ratio itself are quite related, you know. So this is PE ratio, price to sales ratio times 10, and the price to cash flow ratio, they are quite related. They're common move. So that's why we can use the PS the price to sales or price to cash flow instead of PE ratio. But if you have PE ratio number, probably that's the most commonly used multiples in the market. And the PE ratio usually simply called the PER per. So in the market, if somebody called per, then that's the PE ratio. Okay, so that's the end of the part 3. The next part, which is the last part, is about the free cash flow valuation approach.